And what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. We are back with the first installment of this week's MLS news for the 2025 season, where we're going to cover USL's Division One desires, as well as the growing trend of MLS players speaking out against MLS rules and specifically the salary cap. And while Connor remains MIA for the moment, that does not mean I'm running this alone again, because we have brought back our friend Matty Casey from the Royal Riot to share his thoughts on the topic with us. How you doing, my man?
I am awesome. Freshly home from work, wired on caffeine, won't be sleeping for days.
And that's how we like it, because that's where all the best takes come from. So, we got lots to cover, and we're going to get really deep into it. We only picked two topics today because we have learned when we speak to each other, it goes for a while. Because we usually do three, but we know that if we're gonna go at it, we're gonna have to plan for this. But before we can get into any of that, we have to talk scarves because you know how we are. So, what are you rocking today?
Scarf of the week. Because we're going to be talking about the USL, I wore for my first scarf a 2016 era St. Louis FC scarf when I used to go see them play at the soccer park,
Mhm.
which is about 10 minutes from my father-in-law's house. So when I would come out to St. Louis, I would come there. And then, of course,
Nice.
because I can never only do one, I brought a Real Monarch scarf from their May 4th Be With You. Vamos Monarchs.
Oh,
I
it's a
don't want
great look.
Wasatch Legion coming after me and saying, why are you rocking St. Louis and not Monarchs?
Yeah, it's a great look. I love the Star Wars themes. I always want to get one, but it's not quite there. So we are starting with USL first. So I am rocking Lexington SC.
Very nice.
So I tell the story all the time whenever I bring them up, but I actually was working for Lexington FC in Kentucky when they were starting to do the transition and take over and kind of come into the space. And then I decided to leave and go back to the upstate middle of nowhere, New York, to go back to grad school. So I missed out on all the fun, but I did get a scarf out of it. So I take that one with me. And then this one I've been waiting to show off for a little bit, but because one of the players who is upset with the rules ended up going to Kansas City, I have brought out my brand new Kansas City Wizards scarf. This is a top five for me now. Oh, when the little old Wizards logo. It is, I love the colors. I love the design. Definitely up there as one of the tops, and really happy that it came in. So super excited for that.
I will say, and this will get me drummed out of the RSL fan base union because you know that our two teams dislike each other. I love the Kansas City Wizard name. I wish they hadn't changed it. I will die on the hill that Jimmy Conrad is one of the most underrated players our league has ever seen. I also thought that of all the rebrands away from what we used to call like MLS names,
Hmm.
I thought Sporting KC, I thought they did a good job with it.
Yeah, at the time it was different. It wasn't FC or SC. It was different. So
They
I'm
led the
totally
way.
about that, and I agree with that.
And, and they didn't have United in their name, and
Right.
it's not just their city. So if anybody has an extra $600 million and you're thinking of buying an MLS team, just do me a favor. Not just your city name, no United. Maybe you don't need an FC or an SC. We already know what you are.
Right. Right, and that is, if you're picking a hill to die on, I'm picking a hill to die on, and it is going to be the transition away from American sports names in MLS has been the downfall of fan bases all across the world. Because now you always get the constant comparison of, oh, who are you trying to be? Sporting Lisbon. Like you'll never be Sporting Lisbon, right? Like, or who are you trying to be? Real Madrid. You're never going to be. Stop it. Like, leave us alone.
So before we get to my scorching hot take, and I'm not
Yeah.
going to tell you where in this episode it's going to drop, what I'm hearing you say there is that you like the uniquely American way MLS used to name their teams. Would that
Yes.
be fair to say?
100%.
Very good. The smaller hill that I'll die on, by the way, is stop hiring your graphic designers because they're terrible. Just let Matthew Wolf do all the logos.
Oh man, I like it. Well, before we get into this news, we are starting a new series. Maybe not series, but until Connor comes back, we told you guys last week. Connor was probably off in the safari taking pictures of animals, right? But each week we don't actually know where he is. He tells me he's working, right? Lies. Nobody's working this much, clearly. So where is Connor really? To me, I'm gonna guess that he's actually taken a trip out west, and he's on a hiking adventure in the Wasatch Mountains, deep in the heart of Utah. Because I'm going to tie it into to our friends in RSL. That's where I think he is today.
I hope that he's there. I hope that when we go to watch RSL take on Herediano next Wednesday in the second cup game, I
Mhm.
hope we see him in the background, like walking along a mountain.
He's flying a plane.
I took a picture of the stadium from the top of Mount Olympus. My wife was like, "What are you actually doing?" Because, opened all the way out on my phone. You don't know what it is unless I tell you. But I knew
Right.
it.
Oh, that's wonderful. That's wonderful. Oh man. Well, I think we jump into it then. Let's talk this USL Division One news, right? Because recently there was news that broke that the USL had these aspirations of launching its own Division One league by 2027, similar to the setup of NWSL and the USL Super League in the women's game to rival MLS. And CEO Alec Papadakis stated that their ambition was to grow the game at the top level by bringing it to more cities across the world and building what he called a more sustainable and vibrant soccer ecosystem in the United States. While noble, of course, and one that sparked interest in the soccer community at large, they still have to meet a lot of U.S. soccer's pro league standards, including stadium size, owner net worth, populations of cities, and the list goes on, right? Redundant as it may be. But I wanted to start just by getting your thoughts on what you thought about when this news broke, and if this is something you want to happen, or do you want it not to happen? Like, where do you stand on this?
I love the idea that there are going to be professional teams in more cities, in more towns. Love that. 100% love that. I used to work for an ECHL hockey club, which would be, third division. So there's the NHL, there's the AHL, and then ECHL would be on a level with the USL. I mean, it all turns into a thing like, well, this league is more like, grown men beer fighting.
Right.
I love lower level in quotes teams. I want to see more soccer teams in more cities. I would love to see JSFC, Jersey Shore FC, playing in a professional stadium one day. That's my brother's team in New Jersey.
Nice.
I'm sure everybody already knew that, but I'm just saying. I do think that immediately when they brought it up, everybody immediately jumps to, well, are they going to have pro rel? I mean, we got to have pro rel, right? We're going to do pro rel. Slow down.
Yeah.
They have got a mountain to climb if they really want to be a first division specified league. And you talked about some of the laws. This is what I spent my lunch break researching today,
Yeah.
looking at all the things they would have to do to make that happen. I don't want to say it's unrealistic. Who am I to, you know, downplay someone's dream? But there are a lot of things that they are nowhere close to.
Yeah. I mean that is one of the things that popped out to me, right? Like I love the ambition because I always thought that this country had this appetite for football. Like they're one of the arguments against this whole closed ecosystem and everything needs to be in a million person city and all this stuff is like everything else is already there. Right. So you're fighting against four other sports in certain areas to try and get relevancy, where then you pop up in a place like Cincinnati and boom, you blow up, right? So if you went to more places that weren't, saturated with other sports, you might have a better chance at it. And I always thought that was a really, really solid foot to stand on, right? So I think expanding the game, especially in the first division to more cities, is always a good thing. And do I want it to happen? I don't see why it's a bad thing, right? Like you just mentioned, the growth is good, right? And one of the things, and we're going to talk about this later, is competition breeds improvement, right?
Yes.
MLS salary caps, which we're going to hit on later, they've been, I'm going to use the term stagnant for years. Yeah, they've been increasing steadily for decade or whatever, but it's clearly not been enough, right? Toss USL in the backyard and it's like, oh, we got 14 teams that are rivaling you, and we got we've got Louisville City who is pulling 60K a game, like, oh, we're gonna be legit. Well, now MLS like, okay, well, how do we combat that? Well, we got to let these people bring in more players who people are going to want to watch, right? So now you start doing this kind of like balancing act of how do we keep ourselves ahead of the person in front of them, and it's a rising tide that raises all boats, right? So I don't and I'm sure some people be like, oh, like it's weird because you're gonna have two first divisions and you're going to be fighting each other, and that might make it worse. But I see it as making it better.
It would make it better if it were possible.
Yeah,
But and again, I'm sure they have a plan for this, but can we just talk about what they would have to do to make that happen?
we
So,
absolutely can, because the next section is actually the question: will it happen? Is it possible? So please go on.
all right, so just a few of the things that I saw. A D1 league has to have 12 teams or more. By the third year, they have to have 14. No problem, right? USL already has a second division league. They've got a third division league. They can come up with 14 teams, no sweat. They have to have three time zones represented, specifically Eastern time, Central time, and Pacific time. So I guess screw Utah, right? I don't
I
know
never got why they
why.
skipped out that one.
We don't care if you have a team in Mountain Time or not, but you better have the other three.
It never
That
made
bothers
sense.
me, U.S. soccer. I feel about, I'm going to say 22% as angry as when New York Red Bulls took the New Jersey out of their name. 22.5% possible.
That's significant.
75% of the teams have to be in metropolitan markets of a million or more. I don't hate that. I don't love it, but
Mhm.
I get that you want to make it sustainable. Here's the first one where I see that I just see it as such a huge obstacle that I'm like, why are we even talking about this? All of the stadiums have to be enclosed, fully enclosed, and have a 15,000 plus capacity. Now, of the all the teams in the USL, do you know how many teams can meet that standard right now?
I thought four. That was my guess. Just off the top of my head, I was rattling them off. I picked Detroit, Sacramento, Phoenix, and Louisville were the ones that kind of popped off to me.
Okay. I was going to give you a ton of credit for saying Louisville correctly 5 minutes ago, but
And
you just
I
said
messed it up
Louisville.
now. I do it. I flip flop all the time because I was in Lexington for so long, and I
Right.
started with Louisville, and they're like, "No, it's Louisville." I'm like, "Okay, I'll get there," but it's still half and half for me.
We're going to have to edit that out before my wife listens to this podcast. It's Louisville, Miami, and Birmingham.
Really?
So three of the USL teams can meet that standard. And remember, we need to have 12 teams to start,
Yeah.
and we eventually need to have 14. So right now we only have three. Two of them, Miami and Birmingham, share their stadium with, get this, a college football team. Now, can another nine teams do the same thing? Yes, absolutely. But if you're telling me your Division 1 league is playing on football lines, I'm going to tell you right now that I hate that with the
Hmm.
burning intensity of 1,000 white hot suns. So, will I get over it? Yes. Is that probably what they're going to do? It's the only thing I could think of on my lunch.
Yeah.
There are other financial things that they have to meet. They have to have staff. They have to have a broadcast contract. And I guess to me, before we talk about anything else, how do I watch the teams that you have now? If I want to watch the Pittsburgh Riverhounds, and I do, I love
Mhm.
watching that team. If I want to watch the Tampa Bay Rowdies, and I do, I used to go to those games all the time. Jacksonville Armada, I'm not sure they're even still in existence. But with all these streaming devices, all these streaming services that we have, how do I watch your games? Because one of the things that irritates me to no end, check out my ability to self edit even after a 12 and a half hour shift. One of the things that irritates me when I want to watch an NWSL game, it's always an adventure.
Yeah.
Trying to figure out where to watch it. People complain about the Apple paywall. I don't hate it. I love watching championship football on ESPN Plus. If I want to watch Bundesliga, I know I can go to ESPN Plus. It's something that they need to do, and I hope they do it correctly. When this happens, and I think it's going to happen eventually, when they figure out everything else, I hope they pick one paywall, one broadcast, not the NWSL shotgun.
Hmm.
Make a ton of money. I get it. It's a business. One paywall. So I know where I can go to get your product.
Man, that was one of the things I always heard people were like, USL has such a better way to watch it. And I'm like, it's on five different networks at 12 different times. I can never figure out which one it's on. And even when it is, half the time I don't have the streaming service. The other half it's on linear cable, which I don't have anymore because I'm not paying $90 a month for cable. Like I've got everything else I need. So it really doesn't because I've got one spot I can go here, but that's a completely different story, and I totally get it. But um, that for me that was the idea that I had this handful of clubs that probably met the requirements, and like you mentioned, they can hop into football stadiums and do all that whole thing, no problem. But what I actually saw them, and this is me, I'm gonna put my hand up. I'm not an expert on this, so I know you did your research. You can correct me if there are people in the comments that can correct me as well. There are these like territory rights that exist where you can only set up within a certain geographic number, like relation to other teams. And you have to be in cities of over 1 million people population, right? So that instantly limits your geographic range to a set number of places. One, are there enough? And two, does it make sense for you? Like, are there places that you can actually grow and be a part of, right? And I'm assuming that if they're going to do this, they've done their planning, right? They're not dumb people. They've done their planning. They say, okay, we can make it work here, 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 here. But are they going to uproot like teams that don't fit there and move them somewhere else? Are they going to look for outside investors? Like, what does that look like? And that kind of leads me to the next question is like, what does this impact in US soccer feel like? Is it a change of the landscape in terms of team locations? Is it a change of kind of the whole outline of the pro league standards? Like, what are we going to see after this, if this happens after it happens?
So I guess my question, philosophically, romantically, however you want to define I would say love affair. My wife would say obsession with this sport. She's not unfair when she says that. When I watch Premier League, and then lately, I've been watching a lot of Hull City in the championship. I can immediately tell the difference. So if I'm watching Ipswich versus, Brentford, not picking on anybody, or Ipswich versus Southampton, I can still tell a difference between that and when I watch a championship game match. There is a difference in the style of play. There's a difference in the way that the matches are reffed. And then you go down the first division and it's the same thing. I love watching championship matches. It is a dirty, dirty pleasure for me. I don't know that I can tell the difference between the USL Championship and the USL League One. With a gun to my head, I couldn't tell you where the teams I like to watch, and I named a few of them. I
Mm-hmm.
couldn't tell you which league they belong to. So if we're bringing in a first division, is there a really solid point to it? What is it going to give that you don't already have, other than we're first division now? And if that's what it is, that's fair. But why are we doing it first? You think you're going to compete with MLS? I'm sorry, but you're not. They're too far out in front. It's going to be decades before you can attack it. So what's the point?
Yeah, and that's exactly where I'm at. So I had this idea that it was like so I always have I've been kind of preaching this idea that every time you talk about impact on soccer in America, it's always from two avenues, right? General like fan interest of just the game itself, the Premier League, World Cup. Like how does soccer impact it from that side of it? And then how do you impact somebody as a fan to get them into the game, right? So you break it down into okay, you've got your casual fan that only watches the Premier League, you've got your casual fan that only tunes in during the World Cup, you've got your diehard fans of MLS, you've got your general soccer fans who will watch everything that moves as long as it's got a ball that you're kicking to it, and then you've got your I hate MLS, I'm only going to watch lower league soccer, and or I hate MLS, I'm only going to watch European soccer, right? Like there are these different aspects of it, and to me, like the biggest market that you can get are casuals who only really know about European soccer or the World Cup, or the people who don't even know it exists like at all, like general like football, basketball people, right? If you are going to obviously it's going to open up like this whole new aspect of what American soccer can be. There are going to be tons of avenues that you can take and that's the and endless possibilities, right? But if people are sitting here and we're like, and I'll use the European based people who are like, oh, MLS is too American. There are salary caps and no pro rel and all this other stuff. How are you going to get them to buy into your league when you say you're a second first division? you're gonna blow their heads off. Like, what do you mean second first division? There's only one Premier League. There's only one Bundesliga. There's only one Serie A. Like, how can you have two first divisions? You guys are just you guys are Mickey Mouse leagues and blah blah blah. And it's gonna go down the whole rabbit hole, right? So, in terms of the impact on the U.S. soccer landscape, is it going to make as much of a difference as we would anticipate it would over the general population? Maybe you're hitting more cities and towns, and you're expanding it in that sense, sure. But for the people who are already in those areas who are just Premier League fans and hate American soccer because it's not European, you almost might drive them the other way. So I'm really interested to see how that lays itself out, if it's a net negative, net positive, or it just cancels each other's out, you know?
I mean, I've struggled for years to get one of my brothers. When I lived in Florida, one of my brothers lived down there also. We lived in the same town. And I couldn't get him to watch the US national team with me because he grew up, his best friend was straight over from Liverpool. If it wasn't Liverpool or it wasn't the English national team, then it was crap.
Mhm.
And sometimes I would watch a US game and I'd be like, okay, I hear you, because I watch those teams too. Getting him to start watching the US national team took me paying him to drive our van to a US game so that we could all drink, and taking him on the march with American Outlaws into the stadium.
Yeah.
So, and then when he saw the passion, when he saw the, the singing and the dancing and the tifos and everything else, then he was like, wow, you guys are actually into this. And I'm like, yes, we are a real soccer culture.
Mhm.
We are not your soccer culture. We're not like Liverpool. Our song isn't 100 years old, but we have our thing. I do think that there are some fans you will never get,
Yep.
right? There are people who live in the States, but they will only watch Liga MX. Last I heard, Liga MX gets more viewership in the United States still than the Premier League.
Yeah, I think it's very close, if not still there. Yeah.
And they've certainly been number one for years and years. And I was blown out of the water the first time I heard that. So that's fine. You got to get the next generation. So that just begs another question. Are you going to be financially sustainable until that next generation has disposable income? Right. So then where do you put these teams? We go back to your question. The reason that the Florida Everblades, which was the hockey team that I was a fan of and then eventually worked for, the reason that they could pay me to be their public address announcer was because they had 7,000 fans every single night. 7,000 people who were born in other parts of the country, moved down to Florida, retired, and missed hockey. And there was nothing else to do in this town except go to the stadium and watch hockey. But now you need to put a 15,000 person stadium in this town, and there has to be a million people there, and you have to be far enough away from any other geographical area. I'd like to see them succeed. I
Well,
really
yeah.
would. I'm not sure how they're going to do it, and I'm not sure what the hook is going to be.
And that's the big
So,
one, right? How do you differentiate yourself from, oh, we're outside of just saying we're not them, right? Because
right,
that's what they did. That's what they've been going on for years is, oh, well, at least we're not them. We're
right,
different because we have a but you still don't promote and relegate. So what are you really other than MLS light, right?
right. So then, are you going to have promotion or relegation? I told you I had a hot take. I don't care if we ever have pro rel in this country. I really don't. I don't see the advantage. I don't see how it's feasible to a business person. Right before we got on the call, I looked this up. I think that there was a time when we could have had pro rel,
Mhm.
and I would love to catch Don Garber somewhere. For honestly, probably I would kidnap him, put him in a room, tape him to a chair, talk to him as long as he was willing to talk to me before I had to start electroshocking him. But I would love to just have 20 minutes and be like, hey, man, back when you took over, did you ever think about this? Was it ever
Right.
something that you thought was possible? So in 2002, Miami and Tampa Bay were axed. MLS went down to 10 teams. Most of them were owned by Philip Anschultz, Lamar Hunt, and then Robert Kraft had the revolution, which, always makes me happy at the end of a story. Happy at the ends, Robert Kraft. Okay. In 2005, Sorry, I'm not sorry. In 2005, the league started to expand. Chivas USA and RSL came in for expansion fees of 7.5 million. Okay.
I didn't
The
know that was
league
the
is
number.
starting
That's
to grow.
insane.
7.5 million. I thought it was lower than that. In '07, Toronto joined for 10 million. And then 8 years went by before we had expansion. And that was when I was really falling in love with MLS
Mhm.
because in 1996, 1997, I think I tried out for the Metro Stars in 96 and they said, no, thank you. Big mistake. I'd
Yeah.
like to say again, they never won a cup. I'm not saying that it was because they went with Tony Meal over me, but other people have said that. And if you think my mom is crazy, then we have to go outside. At that time, and I know we're going to be talking about salaries later, I'll tell you that I think the thing that made the goalkeeper coach realize he was talking to more of a netter than he realized was when he said, your pay for this backup job would be $13,400 a year. And I was like, awesome. That's great. Just, you okay? Are you in there? So the new team started coming in. I was, honestly, MLS back then was very difficult to watch. For someone who grew up watching Liverpool, who watched a ton of international soccer, it wasn't very high quality. Okay, taking nothing away from some of the amazing players who played. Overall, it wasn't the most pleasing to the eye. Then I was out of the country for a while. I was down in the islands. I was, out being a scuba instructor and living on boats. I came back to the mainland in '04 and started watching right before RSL came in. So they come in at 7.5 million. Toronto comes in at 10. And from '07 to 2015, no new teams. When Toronto and NYC came in, or when New York City came in 15, it was for 100 million. Orlando paid 70. 5 years later, Miami and Nashville paid 150 million. Talking about. I'm not going to talk about 2021 because I don't consider Austin an expansion team. 2022, Charlotte paid 325. So in 2 years, the fee went from 150 million to 325 million. And now, in the year of our Lord 2025, San Diego just paid $500 million to come into the league. Are you telling me that San Diego would be willing to drop down to a second division after paying $500 million to be in the first division? I don't buy it. I don't know how you even broach that conversation with a straight face. These are not local businessmen who own car dealerships and are looking to sponsor their mechanics so that they don't go off on strike. These are billionaires, tycoons of industry. I don't see why. I don't see what advantage. How are you going to go to them with a straight face and say, well, some of the fans are really going to like it though. It will be so romantic. I just don't see it. Now, USL, you're talking about smaller numbers, but you're still talking about significant investment for the people who are making those, who are writing the checks on those smaller numbers. Arthur Blank doesn't own a USL team, and the guys who own USL teams, bless them, they have way more money than me. They're not shopping in Arthur Blank's store either.
No.
Okay, so you're going to tell them, hey, by the way, I know you're barely scraping by now if you're making a profit at all, but there's a chance you get relegated down to a lower division. And by the way, if you have enough bad years in a row, you might be playing basically amateur Sunday league. You might have a 48-year-old goalie who's trying to relive his glory days
Yeah.
facing you.
Yeah, no, it's huge, and again, this always was going to lead to that sort of conversation around pro rel, and we have tiptoed around that because it always brings around the wrong types of conversations, in my opinion. I was a part of that. I was a part of that online for a while where I was like
Oh,
poking my head in there and being like, "Hey guys, like you're throwing stats out. Here are some other stats that I think disregard your point," and it's like, nope, those don't actually matter. It's like, well, why don't they
it's got to
matter?
be pro rel or it's not serious.
Right. Yeah. It's one of those like, oh, look at all these dead teams. I'm like, well, if you look at the first 30 years of the other, the Premier League, they lost. I think the number in the United States for the first 30 years is something like 200. I think the Premier League or the English system lost like 150 in their first 30 years. Like and again, that's Wikipedia numbers, but anyways, like obviously there are these bad conversations come out of it because it doesn't do anything except create animosity, right? But when you can have, I think, positive conversations, I think that's always nice. But if Pro Rel is not coming, or at least for the near future, which is kind of what they were hinting at, was like, yeah, it's a possibility, but it's a way long ways away because you have to go through the PLS, because you have to go through convincing all the owners, you have to do a lot to get that done. What is the end goal then? If it's not going to be pro rel, where does this go? Are we just going to coexist happily as two first divisions?
I want to make one small point
Sure,
just because I still have an athletic subscription.
me
I
too.
let it lapse when Bogert left because honestly, he was 90% of what I read.
Yep.
Not saying that because he is a JSFC alum, although he is. When I read their articles about this, when I talk about this, when I see people, debating it on Twitter, when I talk to my friends, do you realize that they did a vote and they were nowhere close to what they needed from the ownership to get
Mhm.
pro rel? Like they thought, hey, we'll make a first division and then everyone's going to want to do pro rel. They asked the owners and they were like, no,
Yeah.
absolutely not. So that's just another mountain they have to climb.
Yeah.
Great, figure out how to make a first division league. Then you're going to have to stock it with people who actually are willing to do pro rel because right now they don't have that.
Yeah. Well, and
But
that's one of the things. Sorry, before we build onto that, because there's one more I want to say. One of the things that I think always bounces off of that too is like, if you build it, they will come sort of thing. Like, oh, there are millions of people who don't watch MLS because there's no pro rel, right? There are millions of people who don't watch USL because they can't get to the first division. It's like if you walked on the street right now and saw a random person wearing a Liverpool jersey and was like, "Where are you from?" And they're like, "Morris Township, New Jersey," right? Hey,
yeah,
if they put a team in USL 2 tomorrow and they had a chance to get to MLS, would you stop supporting Liverpool right now and put all of your effort into supporting this Morris Township team for 4 years if they do 4 perfect years so that they can go play in MLS? They'd laugh you off the street. They'd be like, absolutely not, because the draw isn't the climb. The draw is what's the best of the best. And guess what? MLS still doesn't even crack the top three, right? I think you mentioned it. It was Liga MX, it was Premier League, and there's probably another European team that bounces over us, right? Like and that's not because, oh man, look at how beautiful Pro Rel is, and you can watch the Southamptons of the world come up and get 12 points a season. Like that's not what people are watching for. They're watching because the best players in the world play there. So until they come
right.
over here, nobody's going to give up their European team to be a main supporter of this team. Maybe they'll balance it, but when you push comes to shove, the reality is they're not going to give that up for at least decades, right? Unless you are creating another generation like we talked about before. But I wanted to add that in because I remembered it before we stepped on. But yeah, please continue.
So what I would suggest then, if it's not going to be pro rel, what they could do, and I haven't seen this mentioned anywhere, why don't you be the guys who switch to a winter schedule, even a clausura schedule or an apertura schedule? My
Mm-hmm.
Spanish isn't good enough to know which one you call it when you split the schedule into two,
Yeah, yeah.
the way they do in Russia. Why don't you guys try that? See if you can get some fans who want to watch soccer all year round. Because I'll tell you, I'm perfectly willing to admit, I mean, it would be tough to deny that I'm an obsessed soccer lunatic. I've got great swaths of my skin covered in ink that would suggest that I am that guy. And if we moved to Colorado Springs, I would be a season ticket holder of the Switchbacks day one and negative day one. I would already have my tickets before I saw my house.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I would be that guy. Would I love them as much as RSL? Absolutely not. Would I go to every game and then watch RSL when I got home? Absolutely yes. So there are people that love to be at a live game, and I'm one of those guys. I always would rather be watching it live. That's more important to me than the level. But you really hit it on the head there. You got to bring the players in. And just like we talk about pro rel, and I just roll my eyes and mentally start thinking about other things. Usually, Bruce Grobbelaar penalty kick saves from 1984. Yeah, that happens. The thing when they talk about, well, MLS should switch to a winter schedule, why don't you go back 3 days to when Kansas City hosted Miami and watch Messi running around? Did he look like he was having fun? Did he look like he couldn't wait to get to the locker room and get on Instagram and tell all his similarly, as close to his level as there exists. Hey, come play. It's really fun here. Now imagine if half your games are like that.
Or
Like,
even go back to LAFC Colorado, right? LAFC Colorado, not only do the quality suck, because we know what LAFC can do, we know what Colorado can do. They're there for a reason, right? And everybody online like, oh, it's MLS, and oh, quality always sucks. Ha 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 ha. No, but
I was
also
just going
look
to
at
say that Colorado always sucks,
yeah,
as you
that's
were.
I will give that pass. Then look at the stands, right? The stands
Right.
are it's 1,000 people in a huge stadium like that. Now, again, we can go down to that conversation a little bit later, but I do still want to kind of figure out like what is this end goal then? Because where does this go? Like, what are we going to do here? If are we just going to like exist? Like, if it's not going to be pro rel, what's next, right? So for me, I'm thinking merger, right? Because I think USL is probably seeing this as a path to pro rel to differentiate themselves. If they can get people on board, maybe it's just a path to say we did it and we can change the PLS and make it open for more people. Whatever it may be. MLS, on the other hand, is going to see this as competition, right? They are going to see, and what they have done in the past, if you have competition, you crush it, right? I don't think that's terribly like bold to say. I think it's pretty clear kind of what their ideas were. But what I think is interesting to this is that this is kind of like USL's almost response to this MLS crush mode, I think, right? So Phoenix, Las Vegas, Indy, Detroit, Sacramento. These are all like potential MLS areas, right? Like this is stuff they were thinking. Now they're like, hold on a second, territory rights. If we're going to be a D1, you can't do that, right? So maybe this is their way of being like, the rules are on our side, right? So you can't use the rules to your favor anymore. But this is screaming Soccer Wars 3, right? And I think it's going to get uglier before it gets nicer. But I do think at the end of the day, we're going to see merger. USL is going to get enough traction to show MLS and US soccer that there is interest in other markets that are not MLS, right? Not just D2 or D3, but D1 interest, right? But MLS is going to be the one that have the money and the pre-established reach to help raise those locations up. So do we see pro rel at the end of this? It depends on two factors. First, how many of these new first division owners in USL are people who are going to come in and just buy their way in, right? In proper investors, not people who are already there that are getting raised up, but people who are coming in and saying your expansion fee is 75 million, I'll pay it and I'm in, right? Because if you got 9 of 12 people who are like, I paid the expansion fee, I'm not losing my expansion fee in a year because of 2 injuries that ruined my season, and you have to put a vote to it, you're not winning 9 of 12 majority away, right? But the other is if MLS does buy out USL, which I think we're away from it, or a long ways away from it, but there is this alternate reality that I did think of, and I don't know how long it would take, but I do see this one thing where it's like, and this is my bold take of the episode, right? USL gains so much traction so quickly, like everybody keeps saying it will, which again, this is bold, that it actually ends up buying MLS out and takes it under their wing. I don't think it ever happens, but I do see an alternate reality where that's actually something that happens, and I think it's like it's kind of funny to think because you have this preconceived notion of like we were here first. But if everybody's saying like, oh, I'm gonna go, and obviously echo chambers and social media and all that, but if you're out here saying like, yeah, we're gonna start this up and instantly everybody's gonna come around, especially after the World Cup, they're gonna find something to latch onto. Maybe it goes the other way, and Don Garber looks for a quick payday before his retirement.
Well, here's what we got to do then. I know how to make that happen exactly. You start by taxing churches the way that you should in this
Yes,
country.
yes,
And then you tell them, but we're going to give you 2 years and you could buy one of these soccer teams and make all of your, I'll just say, flock become supporters of that team. So now we're just synergistically solving all of these issues because we can play inside your mega church. That'll
yep.
hold 15,000 people and a couple soccer teams. You've got the fans built in because they'd rather do that on a Sunday than watch you play air guitar, I would think. I know all I know about mega churches from watching the Righteous Gemstones. So I'm a little bit, just thinking this through as I go. But
Mhm.
something we could look at. Short of that, or someone, the next Elon Musk coming through and saying, I'm just going to buy out the entire league, then I wish I could go back in time. If I could change one thing, I would get into an elevator with Don Garber and talk him into really looking at Pro Rel back in 2014 and saying, hey, man, I know all these clubs have been hemorrhaging money for years and years, and they're about to get an infusion when NYC and Orlando put 170 million into the kitty. But that would have been the time
Yep.
to institute Pro Rel. As soon as they went past the 100 million mark, I think they were past it. Like it
It's
was never
over.
going to happen with MLS. And I wish that there was a way that there could have been some silver-tongued devil that got MLS and USL together in a room and said, let's figure out how to, instead of going our separate ways,
Mhm.
we'll be the first division, you'll be the second division. We're not doing pro rel, but we can still help each other.
Yeah.
Because, like you said, it's the players, right? You think Miami's going to keep their attendance when Messi leaves? I can't say no because I don't know, David Beckham's, whatever else I would say about him, he's not an idiot.
Right.
Jorge Mas is not a moron. I'm sure they've got a plan, but without that big player, they're going to go right back to where they were attendance wise. So they have to
Mhm.
get that player. How are you going to get that player? USL can't compete with MLS salary wise,
Right.
right? They just can't. I just looked up one player. So I'm not saying I'm the salary guru for this, but a gentleman named Kobe Henry, who was a
Yeah.
defender I used to watch down in Florida at the IMG and everything. He went to the USL instead of going to an MLS academy. And then he was sold from USL to France for, I think it was around 700K. I don't know that that number was ever reliably reported, but ESPN said it was around 700K. He went over to France, bounced around on loan into the second division, I believe. And right now he's on loan with RSL. Diego Luna went to the USL. RSL bought him for 250K. I think we had to pay another 25K to somebody who had his rights, San Jose. So we paid 275K. We'll eventually sell him for millions, but we're paying him way better than USL can, right? But now let's look at another guy that RSL bought from USL, Fidel Barajas. We brought Fidel Barajas. I don't have the numbers in front of me. It was, a few $100,000. And then we sold him to Chivas for $4 million
In
CLA
6 months.
Oh my goodness. I love the kid. Absolutely love him. But then they found out, he's not ready to play in Liga MX, or they weren't willing to give him the chance. I'll say that because I think the sky's the limit for this kid. And if you were bored enough to go back through my tweet history, just search on my Twitter history for the word Barajas or Fidel. I don't remember how I referred to him. I watched a GA Cup game that had RSL's fifth string goalie in it. And I watched it to watch him. At the end of the tournament, I tweeted Fidel Barajas. If you're not watching this kid, you're missing out. And
Mhm.
it was when he was 15. Now he's on loan with DC United. So I want that back and forth. I wish we had that with USL or that
Mhm.
MLS. I'm not a we, I'm not part of MLS. If MLS had, hey, we can't get, Xavier Goza, or we can't get this 17-year-old who's really promising, but we can't get him the minutes he needs at the MLS level. Instead of sending you to MLS Next Pro, which I don't know how to nicely say it's barely professional soccer sometimes when I watch it.
Mhm.
We want to send you to USL, where you will be playing competitive matches against men who are desperate to keep their jobs so they can feed their kids. You will learn, you will improve more there than you will in MLS Next Pro. I do believe that. And
Yeah.
I wish there was a way for MLS and USL to be friendly enough for that to be the standard instead of the exception.
Yeah, 100%. And what I'll end on here before we move on to our second topic, this feels almost like a Cold War, right? Both leagues are like plotting and planning what the next move is, trying to outdo the other. And, obviously the following question is who blinks first, right? And after you blink, how does the next one react? And then you're obviously going to have this chain reaction of, people trying to stay ahead of each other. What are we going to do to differentiate? What are we going to do to this? And it really, the question that bolsters off all of this is, does this end in a path of mutually beneficial or mutually destructive, right? where do we see this going? And I genuinely, I feel like I would struggle to see one side win straight up, right? If this goes down and in 15 years USL is like, can't do it anymore. We're not going to buy out. We're not going to sell out to MLS. We're just going to shut up shop and let them do their thing. The whole narrative is MLS killed an entire league and took it all for themselves, blah, 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 blah. And that's going to hurt your PR side, right? On the flip side of it, if USL is spending so much money that eventually MLS is like, fine, do whatever you want, and they go and try and take over after that without the stadiums, without the infrastructure, without any of the stuff, they set themselves up for failure as well. So I don't see how one side can survive and also win the whole thing, if that makes sense. It's either we're both going to exist here together, maybe in a joint pyramid in 50 years where there's up and downs and whatever, or I almost see it as like mutually assured destruction, which maybe that's just the pure optimist in me, but um, that's where I'm at.
I think we'll find out after World Cup when
Yeah.
we see what stars are willing to come play in MLS. So I haven't traveled extensively, but
Mhm.
I talked to players who have,
Mhm.
right? I talked to players who have played all over the world, and they do say that our infrastructure is better than a lot of places.
Yeah.
The facilities, the training facilities, the gyms, the medical recovery, we are further ahead than we sometimes, I think, give ourselves credit in that regard. I do think that MLS is so far out ahead of USL that USL isn't going to be able to catch up, and that eventually they will be the ones who get, I think they, will give up. And what I saw here in St. Louis firsthand, and I was a St. Louis FC supporter, anytime except when they were playing the Monarchs. I loved watching them play. My wife's got family from here. Like I said, I used to go to all the matches, always had a
Mhm.
great time. When MLS came to St. Louis FC folded. And one of the majority owners of St. Louis FC is one of the minority owners of St. Louis SC, St.
Mhm.
Louis City SC. What an amazingly creative name they came up with. I'm still mad about it. 4 years later, why couldn't St. Louis FC that I loved, why can't they be St. Louis City too? Which, if you're having trouble following at home, that's the amazingly creative name for St. Louis City's MLS Next Pro team. But they couldn't. MLS just refused. Absolutely not. They're not going to work with them. I think, and there are there are fans in St. Louis who will not go to St. Louis City
Mhm.
Soccer Park or Energizer Park now because of that. And I respect that so much. I go. I go to as many games as I can, as many matches as I can. And most people do.
Yeah.
And but there are still hurt feelings. I will tell you there are still hurt feelings. And that the attendance fell off last year. When the newness wore off, when the results weren't coming in the way they wanted to, the attendance fell off. So the first, 10, 15 matches last year in that park, I used to send Brian Dunseth, I used to send him videos of just recording from the stands like, you like, brother, you got to get out here and call a game. I don't care if you have to, duct tape Taylor Twellman to a chair so he can't make it here. You need to get assigned to a match out here. This is unbelievable. 22,000 fans standing, singing for 90 minutes. The entire stadium was a
Yep.
standing section. It was incredible. Not like that anymore. I'm curious to see what it's like tomorrow. And most of the fans there probably do not know that there used to be St. Louis FC.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah, and that's the
it's
different.
guys like me.
Yeah, well, and that's a difficult part of it, right? And I think you hit it on the head when you mentioned there was a time where MLS and USL could have worked together, and
Yes.
and they very easily could have and likely should have done so. But unfortunately, I do believe we're past it, and it's time to gear up because the wars are coming, as they say. Um, But
I thought that was my St. Louis FC
I
parka.
thought I,
I
I
thought,
thought you were gonna grab it there. Yeah,
but it was a US one. My wife must be wearing my St. Louis one.
gotcha. Well,
It's a
listen,
shame
like,
that they couldn't figure out how to make it work, but
yeah,
it
yeah, and
it
that's
does
the
lead
thing.
to hilarious things. Like I went to a practice for RSL a couple years ago, and at the end of the practice, somebody from the front office was like, "Hey man, did you want to talk to any of the guys from the team?" And I was like, "Yeah, man, I'd love to chat with Gomez for a minute." And they bring over Andres Gomez, who they had just broken the bank. He was one of their largest incoming transfer fees before they got
Hmm.
Chicho Arango. And I was like, "Hey, Andres, what's going on? Blah, blah, blah. I want to talk to Tomas Gomez, the third string goalie, because he used to play for St. Louis FC. And I remember going to watch him there. And I want to see if he remembers the Chupacabras, which was, one of the fan groups. And,
Yeah, that's
and the
funny.
people from
Yeah,
RSL are just like, Maddie, you are,
you're
they're
crazy.
like, there's only one you, buddy.
Yeah,
We should have asked the first name.
that I can agree with. There is only one Matty Casey. That is facts. Well, we could sit here and chat this forever, and I mean that seriously. I genuinely believe we could sit here and talk about this for the next 4 hours. But I do want to hit on this idea of MLS players speaking out on roster rules, right?
Mm.
Because it's been about 2 months since the LA Galaxy paid off Don Garber and the referees to take away MLS Cup from the Red Bulls, or won it. Depends on who you ask. But since that time, they've had to offload tons of pieces of the team that won that title. And they had to change the pay structures of other key players. And this, of course, made some players relatively unhappy, so much so that they actually took their thoughts to the media, something we don't see a lot of, right? So Maya Yoshida, who was forced to take a pay cut to stay with the Galaxy after winning MLS Cup. Oh, actually, you seem like you want to correct me there. Go ahead.
No, no, this makes my head want to explode. When I read that
Oh,
article, I wanted to, I don't know, do something terrible,
yeah, you
but
you hit me with
I
the
didn't.
this, and I was like, oh, maybe I read something wrong. But no, I'm glad
No,
that we're on the same page here because he, as well as all of us, said that's BS, right? I won a championship. Why am I taking less money? Everybody knows this shouldn't happen, right? And the Galaxy were forced to make this happen to fit under the salary cap and the roster rules. But that wasn't the only move. Jalen Neal was out, Gaston Brugman's out, Marky Delgado's out. All of these players who had such huge either futures with the Galaxy or huge impacts on their championship season all had to go, but none of them possibly bigger than Dejan Joveljic, one of the club's key attacking strikers, who was shipped off to Kansas City, hence the scarf. But this was all to
no.
avoid the cap hit because he came off of the U22 tag. He shows up in Kansas City and he's like, yeah, guys, happy to be here. All the basic PR stuff. But then he goes and hits them with the little dig, right? This wasn't easy. I thought I was going to be in LA for a lot longer. You know about the rules. Hopefully one day it'll change and this league will grow up. I love that quote because I think it's very, very apt. And he says, I think it will happen, but I don't know when. Players speaking out against MLS and its roster rules are not common, but it has been happening at an increased frequency as of late. So I want to ask you, like, do you see this as a good or a bad look for the league?
It seems like it's a bad look, right? But let's remember a half hour ago or 2 hours ago when we started, we were talking about the league contracting.
Yeah.
Okay. I have nothing but respect for the weird that MLS brings to soccer. Keep it unusual, gam, tam. I love it. It makes me laugh. And I'll explain it to people. And when they don't like it, I don't care because they kept a soccer league in my country when every other soccer league in this country has failed. When people say that's because, yeah, they've got people, basically buying into a multi-level marketing with $500 million when I paid 6.5 to get in. Yeah, okay, maybe. I'm not a billionaire. I don't know how that stuff works. But I like that the players are saying it, but I also think we're not the only league where you have to meet financial constraints. You know, you have to do that in England, unless you're Man City, of course. They're
Yeah.
allowed to do whatever they want.
Yeah,
I
and then they
love
just
that we
pass on their points deductions to Everton and we all get hit with it and life's good. Yeah,
I keep saying that one of my father-in-law's best friends is an Everton supporter, and I
I am
love him
too.
dearly. And every time I see him, he's like, when the topic rolls around the Man City, I'm like, man, I just hope they don't punish Everton too badly. They were
I
so
get
bad at Man City, they docked Everton another 10 points.
Yeah, that every time something like that pops up, I get messages from my friends. It goes, "Oh man, look at that! Everton just got docked 8 points." I'm like, "What do you?"
So other teams have to sell players to keep into financial fair play. Okay. I am never, ever ever going to shed tears for the LA Galaxy because they had to, oh, we're being forced to play by the rules. What's going on here, man? Don't you remember who we are? Because, forever they had their own set of rules. Oh, you want to have a designated player? Sure thing. Oh, you
We'll
want to have
make a
another one?
rule for you.
Why not? Anything you want to do. I like the idea that MLS is committed to intelligent loosening of the spending rules.
Hmm.
I like the things that they're doing. I love this intra-league transfer so that
Yeah.
guys like Acosta, guys like Evander, who I love watching, don't have to go play in Liga MX. It broke my heart when Acosta left the first time. I've got a picture of me and Lucci back when I had a lot less gray in this beard from a preseason. Let's see, it was DC United versus FC Cincinnati.
That's a
Not that
wild.
I'll just go to any match, but yeah, and I drove like 3 hours to get there too. And I was talking to Luce as he was coming off the field. I'm like, buddy, like, what has to happen for a team to give you the keys? I watch you play it. I'm like, why isn't like for me, he was the closest thing to Javier Morales that I had seen in the league for a long time. But
Mhm.
no one would let him play in that role. And I was like, man, I wish I could tell you come to RSL, but I don't know if they would let you do it either. And he had to go to Liga MX and be successful there before he could come back, and do it with someone else. But usually when a player like that is upset or there's, salary constraints or the teams have to restructure, they end up going to play in, Liga MX gets a lot of them. But, you go to France, play in a fake league with one team that's going to win every single year.
Mhm.
Go to Germany, play in a league where one team's going to win almost every single year. That stuff drives me crazy. MLS is unusual, yes, but it exists. And the fun thing about MLS is you have a chance to win every year. You know, the Galaxy did win for the 16th billionth time, but they were playing against the New York Red Bulls, who got there like last place, in the West or in the East, however they did it this time. This time, I think they were from the East.
Yeah, this time we made it to the East.
I like that everyone has a chance and not to bring it back to pro rel. But when people tell me your league isn't serious because you have pro rel, we do. We just call it the playoffs.
Correct.
The
Yeah.
playoffs is where we get that drama,
Yeah,
you know,
absolutely.
for me. So I do like the opening of the spending rules. I like that intra-league cash. I love giving teams the choice. Do you want to have two DPs? Do you want to have four U22s? You want to do 3 and 3? How do you want to do it? We're going to let you spend some extra money and we're going to let you do it however you want. We're getting there slowly but surely.
I like that. I think it's a really, really good point because a lot of people who maybe have just joined up in the last 5 years or so, if we started getting big, don't quite understand where we came from, right? And I love the people who clearly have never watched a game in the last 2 decades who will quote something on Twitter and be like, MLS is National League quality and it was better. It hasn't improved in 30 years. Like, why would anybody watch this league? It's like, okay, great. We know that you didn't actually watch anything. So, leave this one to the adults. The adults are going to talk. You can stay up at the kids' table, right? But I think this good or bad depends on which side you're on, right? If you're the MLS front office, like, yeah, clearly bad luck, right? Players are unhappy because of the rules that you've decided to put on yourself or to put on the league to help it get to where we are, right? And I think you hit a lot of really good points on that. But that narrative that is getting out in the press and getting out into where it could dissuade other players from joining your league, right? You tell somebody, I don't want to be this guy to bring it up, but Elias Manuel is kind of a really good example of that, right? Elias Manuel gets traded from us to you, and he basically is like, screw you. I'm not doing that. Like, that's not what you better sell me because I'm not playing for you, right? Now he goes back to Brazil where we're starting to get a lot of people coming back from. And he's like, don't go there. They're just going to take your contract and move it all over the country. That country is, 10 times the size of anything you've ever been in. You have no idea where you're going. Do not go. Right. It could be a negative in that sense. But on the flip side, if you're a fan, right, this is interesting because now you're putting MLS in a place where maybe they need to react and do something a little bit more drastic than they have in the last couple of years. Depending on how much pushback this really gets. So I don't think that this, two players from a team saying, "Oh, I'm not really happy, but I'll get on with it." I don't think it's going to have as huge of an impact as like, hey, USL is coming up, on your butt. You better pick it up. But I do think that it's interesting that we're starting to see more players speak out because that's how you start this kind of ball rolling, right? I think the MLSPA has done a relatively well for fighting for players' rights and getting them a lot more of that stuff. But this ignites the fans, it ignites other players, it ignites the agents and such. And if you put that all together, enough loud voices can make a change. So I think you're starting to see kind of the ball start rolling, and that's going to make it an interesting watch over the next 3 to 5 years, right?
So my question is, if you're amazing, why did you get sold in MLS?
Hmm.
Right? When Andres Gomez was amazing, he's not playing for Kansas City.
Right.
He's not playing for, Colorado Rapids. We sold him to France.
Yeah.
You know, MLS for right now is still a selling league. We could turn it into a thing like, hey, come, like what RSL has done. Not to always harp on the same team, but it's the team I'm most familiar with. You come to us, we will develop you. You will get minutes here. You're not going to be stuck on a bench, like Fidel was in Chivas.
Hmm.
And then when the offer comes in, we understand that this isn't your end goal. We'll move you on. Now, maybe Elias Manuel is going to be perfectly happy. Let me ask, did the club that he's going to get announced today?
No,
I was
no.
always
I
told.
was mentioning because he's Brazilian, like he's gonna tell all his buddies, like, don't worry about it. But I haven't heard where he's going.
He is going to Brazil. Okay, so here's a player. He was playing for the Red Bulls. Everything that you said about his quote is correct. That's definitely what he said.
Hmm.
Okay. And my question would be, not as an RSL fan, but as a fan of the league, why didn't your agent tell you you were getting traded, bud? Do,
Yeah.
do you have an agent? Here's a follow-up question. How did RSL get into the process of securing you your green card without you being aware that it was happening?
Right.
You didn't have to sign any forms for them to do that. You didn't have to do any interviews. That's three. Doesn't make 100% sense to me.
Hmm.
Not calling him a liar. I'm saying the story doesn't, as it's being portrayed right now, doesn't make sense. Which I guess from a perspective matter, who cares? Like you said, it's if not a black eye for the league, it's certainly a poke in the eye, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
But is it the end all be all? I know a lot of RSL fans are really upset about it. I'm perfectly happy seeing a player who doesn't want to be here leave.
Hmm.
We sold him for more than we bought him for, and we got the Red Bulls draft picks. Hopefully, one of them works out, or two. That's usually about what we hit on.
Yeah.
So you look at, and again, this comes back to me being a Liverpool supporter. So everyone is going to be, and I don't want to tell people how to fan. And I don't want to tell you how to feel. Feel however you want to feel, fan however you want to fan. But for me, when you don't want to play for my club, I don't want to see you anymore.
Right.
Okay. We used to have a guy. Do you remember Philip Coutinho?
Oh yeah.
Maestro, magician. Loved watching this kid play. I do not usually put a name on my jerseys.
Hmm.
Okay. 80% of the jerseys that I have, it's the team, not the name on the back. I bought a Coutinho jersey.
Wow.
When he said he didn't want to play for Liverpool anymore, I was like, wow, man, that's kind of messed up that he said it in the press.
Yeah.
Then he started with, oh, my back hurts. I can't play this weekend. But on Wednesday, I'm going to go play for Brazil. Oh, I can't play this weekend because I hurt my calf playing for Brazil last week. Well, that sucks. Next Saturday, I'm going to go play for Brazil. I was like, get this guy out of here.
Right.
I don't wear his jersey anymore. I don't think I even still have it. Honestly, I was like, get out. I don't care how good you were. Torres. Oh, you're too good to be in Liverpool? Jog on, mate. Good luck. And we take that money and we use it to buy, I mean, not Torres, but with Coutinho, we use that money to buy Alisson Becker and we used to buy Virgil van Dijk and start bringing trophies. Meanwhile, what has he done since he left? So if you don't want to be here, see you later.
On you
I
go.
personally don't care. If you don't want to play in MLS, there's plenty of other leagues out there. Go find one.
Right.
Okay. The reason you're here is because you wanted to come to America. You wanted to see what it was like. If all you wanted to do was travel for a year, great, you got that year. If you wanted to come here because we pay better than a lot of these leagues, then you made your decision. And if you didn't read your contract, then that sounds like it's on you. And I don't think that Dave Vandenberg is crying any tears for you. Okay. Now I'm really talking to like five of your listeners who remember Dave Vandenberg, but he was a player that I used to watch. Played for the Red Bulls. Okay.
Oh, won the Western Conference for us.
Played for FC Dallas. Dave Vandenberg with the ball at his feet would make defenders piss themselves.
Mhm.
You just see the terror as he started running in their general direction. And at the end of his career, he was with Dallas, and Shellis Heidemann didn't rate him. You know, that amazing coach. I think everyone thought he was an amazing coach because he had a brown jacket, and everyone was like, "Ooh, such an amazing coach." Whatever, man. Maybe he's an awesome coach. He wasn't very good to a friend of mine, but we'll leave that aside. FC Dallas didn't want Dave Vandenberg, and they also didn't want him to go to RSL. We were willing to pay him to play for us. So I'm told, but Dave confirmed that when I talked to him about it, and he wanted to go, and they said no. He owned his rights. There was no free agency back then. There was nothing he could do. He could either leave the league or he could retire, and he retired. And this was what, 10 years ago? We have come a long way. So, side point, this is one of my favorite MLS trivia questions of all time. Do you know who the first free agent was in MLS?
Oh yes, I read this yesterday or 2 days ago.
Because it comes up in this conversation,
Yeah.
right? It was Justin Mapp, by the way.
Yes, yes.
Uh, the,
I was gonna say Chance
the,
Myers, but I'm like Chance Myers never left.
like Justin Mapp had like the greatest hair in MLS, and it receded, and he just kept going with the mullet with the receding hairline, and I just respect the hell out of that. MLS is growing leaps and bounds in
Mhm.
the way that they pay players, in the way that they give players autonomy. Is there room to grow? Yes. I love that NWSL does not have a draft next year. Next
Yep.
year, if you want a collegiate player, then you have to go talk to that player and you have to convince them that you're the landing spot for them and that you're willing to pay them something that they're willing to accept. And I'd like to see more of that. I'm always going to be on player side as opposed to, you know, Evil Empire
Hmm.
MLS's side. But, I'm realistic. I don't have a problem with MLS's rules and strictures. And if you juggled and made a lineup that you couldn't keep for years, that's on you.
Sure.
I feel bad that a player might be going to Kansas City when they don't want to go there, but I also find it incredibly difficult to believe that they didn't have other offers available.
Yeah,
You
no,
know,
I think that's I, I'm always I agree with you, man. When going back a couple of points now, you're like I'll never feel bad for LA Galaxy for having to give up a player or lower stuff. Like I agree with you. I never feel bad for the teams, but I do feel bad for the players, right? Like I agree, drafts, and I think the other thing NWSL did really well was no trades without
player consent.
consent. Thank you. That's what I'm looking for. Right. I think those are two really, really good and really, really easy things to do. Right. That's not a difficult change to make. Right. Even if you want to say we got to keep the draft because we've got connections with whatever, fine. No trades without player consent is easy. Right. And that's something I wouldn't be shocked if the MLSPA is pushing for next CBA because it's not hard. Right. Hey, listen, you want to trade us? Fine. But tell me where I'm going. Like, give me the option to be like, no thanks, buddy. Like you got to do something else if you don't want me here because I'm not going there, right? And that's easy. So there are easy ways that this league can get better, and that is a whole nother conversation we can have, and we will have.
But they've shown that they're willing to do that.
Yes, and that's
So
important.
for me, that's where this all ends,
Yeah,
right? Is MLS perfect? No. Are players, teams, fans going to be upset with certain moves? Yes. Is that ever going to change? No. But MLS has shown that they're willing to engage in conversation, constructive discussion about how they can lessen the pain for the fans, lessen the pain for the players. It does, like you said earlier, it does nobody any good when a player goes home or when a player is on holiday and they're like, oh, you don't want to go there because of this or that.
right.
If you want to point and laugh because we have Gam and Tam, point and laugh. We got a league. You have a league. In our league, every team has a chance, maybe not an equal chance,
Right.
right? But I can't control your front office. If your front office is on the ball, and you have a little bit of luck, anybody can beat anybody. I
That's
believe
right.
that.
Oh yeah.
And
No,
I like that.
yeah, and that's the draw of it. People are always, you mentioned it, right? People are always like, oh, like you're a fake league without pro rel. You're fake if you do this, fake if you do that, right? There are people, and evidently a good amount of them, who don't get drawn into leagues where it's between 1 to 4 teams every year. Like that's just not a draw to them, right? And the relegation battle doesn't matter, right? At the end of the day, those teams are going to be there for 1 to 2 years, and then they're gone again, right? And that is something that is legitimate. Like that's not just like, oh, the five MLS fans, all they care about is their league, so they're going to find any way. There's a significant amount of people who, are like, I always talk to my friends who are basketball, football, baseball guys. I'm like, yeah, pro rel sounds like so cool, like it's the coolest part of soccer. I'm like, how many games you watch in the last 5 years? He's like, oh no, I don't watch soccer, I just think it's cool. I'm like, if we brought it here, would you watch it? He's like, no. There you go, right? And that's not just three people that I'm friends with down the road, right? Like that's
Andrew, you don't have to brag to me, buddy. I'm very confident that you have more than three friends. I believe you.
Oh, it's funny, man. Well,
Even if they
listen.
went to another high school and that's why I never met them. I believe that you have three friends. I believe.
Oh man. Well, listen, this is another one we can go on for hours and hours and hours on, but we're gonna have to cut it here because otherwise we will. And my neighbors are not gonna want to hear me going on about our lovely Western 2008 Western Conference Championship at midnight on the Eastern Coast here. So I want to say thank you so much for another fantastic conversation. You know I love these, and I wanted to give you a little bit of time to tell people again who you are and where to find you and what you do.
Thanks for having me, Andrew. But when I saw your invitation, I lit up. Like, absolutely, these are topics I want to talk about
Yeah,
anytime. And
good.
I'll just say again, like if you're ever looking for me, I'm probably listening to a designated players podcast about a match from 15 years ago. And I'm remembering like I when he did that. I remember when he said that. So I am just some soccer lunatic. I don't exactly understand why I'm in a place where people care about what I have to say, but it happened. I am on Twitter at ShinKicker13. That's my Blue Sky. That's my Insta. That's my Reddit. I write a lot of, I did a Reddit preview for RSL recently and talked a lot about the Elias Manuel thing, if you were interested in seeing that. I am on the Royal Riot podcast, which is a weekly podcast about Real Salt Lake. We also have a separate team under the same name that covers the Utah Royals. If you are an NWSL fan, want to hear about the Utah Royals, right now we are the only Utah Royals weekly podcast. And we got an amazing team. You can find my ratings on abc4.com. That's the local Utah affiliate. And you can always find me in the supporter section. That's where I'm going to be, even if it's, unless RSL is playing the team and I'm in your house, I'll be in the supporter section. I will always find somebody who will give me permission to be in there because that's where I want to be.
There
And
you
among the
go.
lunatics.
Love that. If you are new here and you have come over and this is the first episode you're seeing that isn't a team preview, this is how we do things here. This is what the designated players do, man. We sit down. MLS does something silly or USL does something that relates to what we do, and we just sit and we talk about it, right? And we share honest and open thoughts about how the league can improve. We share how that will impact what we can do, and we try to be as impartial as possible, right? Like we were talking about all day today, right? There are things that can get better, and we are not afraid to tell them, but we're also not afraid to defend the things that it does well. So that's what we do here. And if we're listening to what Matt was saying before, yes, we also do an MLS history segment. So I think we're up to 500 stories now on the list, something like that, but all fan selected. So if you are a newer supporter and you want to learn about what made MLS based on what the fans saw, we cover those stories. So come give us a follow as well. Maddie, thanks so much again for being here. We really hope you enjoyed it. Listeners, thanks so much for listening to us. We really appreciate you. And we'll see you next time on the next episode of the Designated Players and MLS podcast. See ya.